Hello, families, and welcome to another episode of Thriving Special Families. I'm your host, Crystal Sanford, and today our topic will be better health for our kids. We're going to learn about osteopathy for kids, and I'm so happy to have my guest today here, Dr. Roeshan. Hi, Doctor.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to
Yes.
have a great conversation.
Awesome. So glad to have you here today. For parents, if you are listening to us through our podcast, then welcome to the Thriving Special Families family. You are in the right place where we offer insight, humor, and hope for your special needs parenting journey. And if those of you who are watching us live, welcome as well. And feel free to add your questions or comments to the comments section, and we'll do our best to answer those today along the way. And lastly, always remember that the information that is shared here is for your informational purposes only and should not be construed as advice. If you are in need of medical or legal advice, please do contact a professional in that area. So we already have our first guest here watching. Peggy, welcome. So glad to have you here today. And again, our topic is better health for our kids, learning about osteopathy for kids. So I really am so glad to have Dr. Roeshan here today. Dr. Roeshan is an integrative osteopathic manual medicine practitioner. She holds a doctorate in osteopathy and naturopathic medicine, a PhD in osteopathic clinical studies, and an MS in athletic therapy. Dr. Roeshan has spent the past 20 years in continuing to enrich her practice in this area. So we are very happy to have you. And Dr. Roeshan, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story and what led you to the field that you're in today.
I have to say my story started early on, as a lot of ours did, and it really started in my childhood. My first, looking back now from where I am, the journey that got me here, was my first TBI, my first brain injury, and I say first because I've had a few along the way with different sports and just life, was falling off of a jungle gym and as a kindergartner and having quite the fall head first in requiring stitches and a little reconstruction and all those impacts. Then that's a pretty big impact on the body. And what I find is, like, through life, we have these little insults, whether they're environmental, if they're impacts from sports injuries or little bumps and bruises from learning how to walk and hitting the coffee table and all those great things that are just part of being human. And so along the way, I had developed a little bit over time, and really because it was such a young age and even difficulty learning to read, staying focused, a lot of little things were coming up, and then aches and pains in my body that I had not lived in any other body, so I just never really thought much about it. Even at the age of 13, still being quite athletic and traveling in competitive form. And over the years, just little by little, having those wears and tears and those things that was affecting my sleep and my digestion, my overall well-being. And through nutrition, through movement, through osteopathy was really what helped to heal my body and allow my brain to thrive, my digestion to thrive, to clear out the insults that had come into the body. So that kind of brought me on this train. And I originally was in the train of forensic science because I love learning and kind of looking at things and how each one of us are unique and how we express or move through the world and our communication, whether that's through movement or through communication of speech, how that is affected by what has moved through us, any type of trauma or joy, right? So all those things are expressing through us. And so what I found is, after shifting and finding this incredible style of work that was helping me tremendously, I found that osteopathy was really just this great love and this lost art that is slowly thriving back into particularly Western culture, which is where it originally came from. But we had lost it for a little while there, and it's slowly coming back and really helping people. And it's non-invasive, it is effective, the body's very responsive to it, the nervous system in particular. it's really, I think, saved and created a path on my life and helped me create a career to help other people do that in theirs too.
Wow. Well, what a turnaround from, injury to then turning that into something that became a passion and now a profession for you. So that's awesome. And I think for a lot of us in fields, in helping fields, we are kind of pulling from our experiences and those things that we have seen that have worked and then turn that around to help others. So that's great. So you talk about osteopathy, right? So, for the novice that I am, and for many of us as parents of kids with special needs, can you explain to us exactly what is osteopathy?
So osteopathy, I almost think of it as the Western view of the first holistic medicine, in that there's a lot of cultures, like I find traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic or Indian medicine, they're really looking at the whole being. And we had gotten to a point in Western or more traditional medicine, conventional medicine, when we got really highly specialized, where we're looking at the neurologist is looking at neurology. We've got the PT looking more at movement specific, or the OT working with the occupational therapy. And even when we're looking at something as simple as like eyes, we've got an ophthalmologist, or we're looking at respiration and breath, you've got your pulmonologist. And so what we really do as osteopaths is we're looking at the whole system. So we're looking at the nervous system, so how it's responding to its environment. We're looking at the digestive system, so how it's receiving nutrients or helping to remove any pollutants in our air or water or contaminations that we might have experienced. Are we actually eliminating, getting rid of, or clearing and cleansing? We're looking at the actual physical nerves, so we can by hand, if it's a trait, so you can kind of specialize in different ways. We're looking at the neural pressures, so how much pressure within a nerve is there too much? Is there not enough? Same thing with the arterial system. So the primary principle of osteopathy is the body is a unit. So we have all these gorgeous systems within it, and they all function as a whole, and they have their independent systems. So we want to make sure that the systems are all integrating and working well, communicating well on a cellular level, making sure that the nervous system isn't hypervigilant, thinking that there is a perceived threat, or always on that high alert. And all forms of the nervous system are important, whether it's the intrinsic in the gut, your vagal system, which is really part of that autonomic nervous system, and fight or flight, or rest and digest, or freeze, all of these different things that our systems, and all are important and are needed at different times. But we want to help the body regulate and look at all of the systems and how they're interreacting and playing with each other, to let the not one system be overstimulated or one under, and whether it's like hormones and things of that sort. So we're really looking at a functional level and looking at mechanically what helps that all of those functions thrive and communicate together, because there's no part of you that's not connected. And so it is important to have our specialists, but it's also important to make sure that the nervous system's addressed, and we're looking at these systems as a whole and how they relate and interact with each other.
Wow, that sounds like just a wonderful perspective, and I think, like you said, almost a lost art, in our culture. So that's wonderful that you are able to help us focus and bring all of these parts together. I think about our kiddos on the spectrum, like my own daughter. Again, I'm a speech pathologist, I'm a special ed advocate, but I'm also a parent of a child with special needs myself, and I think about that. One system overwhelming another kind of a situation, and that can be pretty common. And that leads me to my next question. How does osteopathy fit for a child with special needs, and where's the place for that?
I love this question because it's one of my favorite fits for any child, human with special needs. Is with osteopathy, we really let the body have a voice. And so a lot of times the communication, so whether that's with an infant that doesn't have communication that like standard language or even body language yet to really let us know what's happening. There's so much information that can be transmitted via the body. And so what I love about osteopathy is it, again, being hands-on, gentle, non-invasive, is we give the body a voice. So the body gets to speak, the brain, the digestive tract. So when we're putting our hands on the tissues, you can really get a sense of what's happening. We do oftentimes like a general listening. So we're checking in to see and feel what is happening as a whole in the system. What is the biggest part that pulls up in that particular day or that session? Is it the nervous system? Is it the digestive system? And it's also looking at mechanically, for example, if I get drawn to a particular location, it could be on the right side of the body. It's halfway down. Let's say it's surrounding the tissue around a liver. There could be tension around a liver that's pulling. It can be drawn. Sometimes it's something that's as simple as there was some birth trauma for there's this gorgeous ligament that surrounds the liver, and there's many ligaments that hold it in place. We don't ever think about like the suspensory ligaments that hold a liver in its place.
Wow.
And it does so much function to help clear. And if the liver's clearing and digestion's working well and the bowels are moving well, then we can help with digestion, with elimination, which helps clear the mind for easier function or cognition, all these things. So if the body can communicate that, because I know for myself, I'm not necessarily thinking like, oh, my liver's a little sluggish right now, or there's some tension around it. And bringing back to that like delivery, it could have been a mechanical thing where that beautiful, right around the middle of the liver, this great thick band of tissue also forms and comes out the navel and was attached to, for example, the umbilical cord. So if there was a short cord, or if it had tension on it, or if there's a quick drop. So there's all these little things that can be cumulative, that over time can create tension there. And if there's a tension or pull, and then you've got these great nerves that innervated that are gifting the body information from the brain, but then back up to the brain as well. So this two-way street between the brain and body that we're constantly in communication with the osteopathic work. It's really beautiful to see. You might have a lot of times with different special needs, you might have a kid. And what I love is that if they're non-verbal or they're not as expressive, that their body doesn't tell a lie. Like it'll show you what it needs. And so we might find that even their posture improves by working with what the tissues are showing. We might find the digestion, the sleep, all these things that help to improve general function, cognition, learning patterns, movement patterns. And when you can ease those stresses off the body mechanically, it gives so much more room for a lot of times if there are other elements that are at play that are causing neural inflammation to clear more easily. So it's really working mechanically and giving the body a voice and looking to see how that interacts. So just working with that ligament, for example, around the liver could help it to clear more easily, which might help with the enzymes to break down food. And we know how important food itself is. So the wrong food can suck the energy out of us versus gift us energy. And so if we're giving ourselves more energy, it's more easeful for the function of the liver to take the nutrients from your food and deliver it to the body. A lot of times there's nutritional deficiencies that can be occurring with special needs. There can be those environmental factors that have come into play that maybe we had exposure to in utero or previously, or some type of environmental event, biotoxin, fungal infections, all these things that can affect us. So if we have the ability to let our body mechanically get those systems working back to a healthier state, it can clear and get out of the way from the body thriving.
That sounds like a wonderful resource. Like you said, it's safe. It sounds like a beautiful alternative to help address some of the issues that our kiddos have. And I could see a lot of wonderful side effects that could occur, like, digestion improves, other things that maybe you weren't necessarily focusing on could improve as well. So that's great. And for parents who are just joining us, welcome again to another episode of Thriving Special Families. I'm your host, Crystal Sanford, and always know that our show is sponsored by Sanford Autism Consulting, where you can receive support and advocacy for the education that your child deserves. Our topic today is better health for our kids, and we're learning more about osteopathy for kids. And we have Dr. Roeshan here, who is our wonderful guest. So, Doctor, please explain to us again, as maybe parents who are not as familiar with this practice, what does a typical osteopathic manual therapy session look like? If we were to bring our child in, what would a parent expect as a part of what you provide?
So it is hands-on. So we'll be working with the children. It's very light in its touch. If they find, depending on the age group and their function or level, sometimes I will be just letting them play or working on a puzzle, on a project, while we're working on the body. So they might be seated upright. If they're comfortable, they can lie down on the bench or table as well for the therapy. And a lot of times I'll start with checking the system as a whole. So we're just kind of chatting about that. I might check them standing, sitting, and lying down just to see how their relationship with gravity might shift in terms of where the strains or pulls are coming from. And then in addition to if there's anything that they're coming in specifically for, right? So a lot of times it's the overall system. We want to see if we can get that foundation of the nervous system to be a little bit more settled or more comfortable. And so by checking in to see where the nervous system's at, taking a look at what would be the highest priority for that individual in that session that day, and also that's giving that body the voice, so checking in to see the systems within the body, and then also, of course, addressing if there's something in particular. So sometimes it can be trouble with something like swallowing. It may be, depending on the child's age, nursing, so rotation of the head. It can be with just overall, like if sometimes kids will come in and they kind of hit a plateau with some of their other therapies, like their OT or their speech therapy. And so a lot of times, if we can go back to that foundation of like, what can we do to have the integration of the nervous system as a whole, which is the regulator of all the systems, find harmony or decrease its stress or load. So then the physicality of what we're doing too is, you might see that I've got a hand on a child's head, and we can adjust and work with different cranial pressures. We also have different cabin pressures within the cranium itself, the thorax, the abdomen, and the pelvis. So all of those, helping to harmonize those. We can work with individual organs. And then I find great beauty in working with the brain itself, but also the spinal cord, the cerebral spinal fluid. So we bring into account bringing in the visceral function, so what's happening in the visceral organs, but also what's happening, like we were talking about earlier, the nerves. So all of the nerves are going to come from and then to the brain. Some are through the spinal cord, a majority of them. And then you also have some that are like the accessory nerve, or some of the nerves like the vagal nerve that aren't going through the spinal cord and coming directly out of the cranium or brain into, in this case with the vagal nerve, into all of the organs. And so there can be tension within that nerve. We can adjust it via the organ. We can actually play with the pressure within a nerve by hand. We can alleviate or create some space in the joints, really gently and mechanically, having the nervous system lead the way. So there's nothing that's high velocity or fast, quick movements.
Wow, well, that's good to know, because for some of our kids that could be kind of disruptive.
Overload.
You're right,
Yeah.
overload for sure. Yeah. And so what types of children would you say osteopathy would be appropriate for? I mean, have you worked with kids with autism, ADHD, learning disabilities?
Yes, all of them.
Okay.
I think it's for all humans, and I think it's of great benefits for all humans, but particularly for any child with special needs, because I think that again, when we're giving them a voice, it's particularly if they can't voice, and even adults, it's like we don't necessarily have the voice for what it is that something feels off, or with kids with special needs, a lot of times their system is just so overstimulated. To be able to find a path into the system that helps, that doesn't add an additional stimulus, that creates a safe space for them to literally physically unwind, and to be able to feel safe enough to receive the work is, I think, tremendous and huge. And I feel like osteopathy is one of those safe havens. And it may be like the first time a child comes in, they're almost antsy or apprehensive. They might
Mhm.
not settle well. And I find over a couple of sessions, and
Mhm.
sometimes even within the first session, they're like not wanting to leave. They're like really enjoying the space. Sometimes they'll like come in and just want to like lie on the table because their system, like even if they're not quite aware of it. I mean, I feel like this way as an adult, that there's
Mhm.
something about the system, the body, the nervous system, the tissues being heard,
Mhm.
and listening for those little whispers, because those big shouts and those large movements, sometimes if there's a tick or a movement, to be able to hear and feel the subtleness behind it, the body, the being behind it just feels not only heard, but that they're getting relief, that they're getting the help that they need, versus like the cognitive of what is happening or how is this working.
Mhm.
Just being in the sense of feeling heard and felt and held in a way that is helpful and comforting to the system so it can self-regulate. Because the primary principle of osteopathy, again, our body is a unit, and that we innately have this healing power within us.
Mhm.
And so in some instances, it's not even necessarily that the way that the being is wrong or broken. It's just that we need to fine tune it so it can thrive beautifully with the system it's working with, and eliminate some of the things, those toxins, whether they're coming through food or other regions, water, that can be removed, so it's one less burden on the system so it can thrive,
Mhm.
so it can and feel safe.
Yeah, right. And be its best, right? That it has the capacity to be. I talk a lot about in my advocacy practice that every child can learn. And I feel like, osteopathy is a nice support to that, giving the child the space, giving the child's body a space to be prepared so that they can learn and take in the information that's, being provided to them on a daily basis. So, yeah, it sounds beautiful. Um,
I'm going to say on that note, Crystal, also, something I haven't spoken to yet is even whether it's processing speed, or so when someone, for example, gets a concussion, and it doesn't have to be like a full-blown grade 5 concussion, just a simple concussion. In osteopathy, we even think of insults to the system, trauma, physical, emotional, environmental, can concuss the system. So it's easy to relate to sometimes. If someone has had a concussion, they might have a delay in processing, or the lights, things can be overstimulating. Gives us
Mhm.
a tiny, tiny glimpse of maybe what other children are experiencing. But
Ah,
there can be ways that we can address even simple things like patterns with reading or processing speeds or
mhm,
learning. Things of that sort can also be improved greatly with a decrease in a particular pressure in the brain. So we never really think about it, but there's all these little pressures in each nerve. There's pressure, there's neural pressure, and then the way that the cranial bones are resting or sitting, or even the facial bones, have a huge influence. And we have this gorgeous connective tissue sheath, this fascial sheath around the brain that protects it, and the cerebral spinal fluid that bathes and cleans it, and to make sure that that's really self-regulating and cleaning and helping to bring fresh nutrients in to get that great turnover.
mhm.
But it also, if there is something subtle, so sometimes when kids are born, you can see there's some malformations in the head, or maybe they've been resting in the womb in a particular location. But
Right.
there's lots of like subtle pieces within this that aren't so visual. And
Mhm,
so we can help with those too, for if any of that is happening as well, which I think is a beautiful way, again, and it's letting the body express that. So when we get to feel the hands on the tissues, and it's very lightweight, but it's very informative,
mhm,
that we can feel those tiny nuances that are so subtle that it's not necessarily something you're going to see visually or in imaging, or even
mhm,
something refined like an MRI may not pick up on something such a subtle pressure. That
mhm,
when we help to create a shift of a more optimal pressure or alignment, the function of that area tremendously improves. Just like if there's a kink in a hose, it's going to either spread out or spurt out in many directions. But
Right.
if you can help align it, it's this smooth movement through the nervous system, through the physical nerves, through motion, emotion, things of that sort.
That's wonderful. So, families, if you're just joining us again, our topic is better health for our kids, and we're learning about osteopathy for kids. And what I'm hearing, Dr. Rowe, is that osteopathy is a safe space. It is a safe space and a safe alternative for our kiddos who may be struggling in a variety of areas, be it cognition, learning. Brain fog sounds like even any child who might be struggling with attention or sleep issues or digestion. It sounds like this could be a safe way for that to be addressed. So if a parent is bringing their child and you're working with them, how can a parent know that osteopathy is working?
That is a beautiful question. So what I find is some subtle things like digestion and sleep are usually some of the big ones. Behavioral and learning that start to increase again, or again, some of those other therapies that are part of the village that are helping this beautiful child. You might find it, like if someone has come across a bit of a plateau in a OT or in school, in learning, or even in a behavioral challenge, things of that sort, that those start to get better. I think the things that are really wonderful too, the postural one is a big one too, energy. So a lot of times that can go either way in terms of how it's expressing, to find a more even keel balance. So sometimes when the body's working out a lot, it can utilize a lot of energy on a cellular level where they're really depleted of energy, and other times it's really highly expressive. So depending on where they are, you can see that little bit of a shift, even on a cellular level, that getting that through nutrition and through movement, and then also for the system actually being able to utilize those, whether it's supplements or food, or if they're detoxing or clearing something out of the system, to see their energy come back. Elimination's a big one. So if the digestion's coming back online, if the brain's clearing, I really think it's hugely important, and I know that most providers know this to be true, or most humans, is that we're eliminating. So to make
Right.
maybe more consistency, if they're too loose or not moving, if there's cramping, or all of those things are, if we're in the flow and literally that's moving through us, that's going to help everything, every system. So those are kind of more the things that I often see. Sometimes social engagement is a big one too, which I think is huge, in terms of like their ability to, if some of the bigger things like eye contact or touch, or their physical engagement into an activity or toward another. These children are so beautiful and so sensitive. And so, I don't know if empathetic's the right word, but so connected. But because the expression of that is not so clear, that sometimes we don't realize that, like how much they're picking up on their environment, and they're
Right.
typically brilliant, so
Yeah.
talented. And when they can express that in even the smallest ways, it's huge. It's
Yeah.
huge.
That's beautiful. Thank you for the work that you do, giving our children, like you said, giving them a voice by giving their body a voice. It's wonderful. We do have a question here by Alexandria. Thanks for watching, Alexandria, and listening today. What are your thoughts, Dr. Rowe, on fish oils, and are they full of mercury? Wow, good question about supplements.
Very good question. So, in general, our EPAs, or our essential fatty acids, or DHAs, they are hugely important with brain function, and particularly with neurological function. There are a lot of things that are contaminated in the world, and in our fish. And so I think it is important to speak to your provider and find a supplement. There are supplements that are screened, and cleaned, and even raised in a way that does make sure that they have their natural environment. So they are getting their natural omegas, and versus farmed, for example. So something that can also come up with fish oils too is solvents. So sometimes there's solvents that get used, and when you're clearing out the mercury and the other contaminants that can be found in fish, we want to take out the bad and make sure just the good's left over. So making sure that it's a company and a facility that takes that into consideration. So you're not getting leftover residues that maybe are used during that process, or if they're not even screening and it's coming through. So the answer is yes, they can be, and yes, we can, and do have options that are done properly. So we're not putting in the bad stuff as well as the good stuff.
So, our topic today being osteopathy and this type of a therapy for our kiddos, we do have another question in regards to the fish oil question is, do you have a recommendation of a brand that is safest? I guess in supplements in general, maybe are another piece to the plan in supporting our kiddos, but I'm not sure if you have specific recommendations.
There are a few companies that I like more than others. Typically, so as a general, rather than like shouting out just specific brands, most brands that are doing that extra calibration, they're not on the shelves at a health food store, things of that sort. They can occasionally be, but what I find is that they're typically through practitioner specific, because they're looking for people that are really keen on having it be clean. And so, sad but true, the regulation of supplements is quite loose. I think, and so it's astounding, as is food, right? So what we see in the shelves to what food actually is versus what's sold in a typical market is astounding. So I would just reach out to one of your providers to see if they have one that they personally recommend. I know that you can always reach out to me one-on-one, and we can chat about that as well.
Awesome. So, Doctor, in our final time together, and parents, if you're watching us live, feel free to add your questions to the comment section. We'll do our best to answer those before we end here. But Dr. Roeshan, I'd love to hear about a story of your work with a special needs family and how that has gone.
So I would say it would be one of the first families I ever worked with. And it's kind of what was another initiator. Early on, I would say maybe about 18 years ago, I was in clinic and still studying at that point, although I feel like I'm a lifetime studier with all the great things we keep learning about ourselves and our nervous systems and the world that we live within. And I was on a rotation. I had been working with this young boy, and he was between 3.5 and 4 in the time that I was working with him. And on our third session, and you read about this, and I had studied it and believed so much in this work, but it was really the first time I was working with this particular population. And it was like this great progression where I could see and feel a change in his system. And the first session, he was a little more apprehensive. By the second, I figured out that he really liked zippers, so I'd make sure I always wore a zipper, so he would play with my zipper while I was working on him. And so all these great ways to find ways into his system. And by the third session, he hopped off the table, ran up to his dad and hugged his leg and looked up at him. And not at that time having as much experience, his dad just melted, and it was really beautiful to see. It totally chokes me up just to think about all of those moments, because unbeknownst to me, being a young practitioner and not having experienced that, and each time it's so beautiful, but I hadn't really taken into account or really understood the magnitude of his child had never run up and hugged him or looked him straight in the eyes or things of that sort, which seem so simple but are such a beautiful connection. So those little moments, and there's little things like that just melt me and just make it so much bigger than I can perceive just the beauty that's within that soul that got to shine out. Or I really do believe it's always shining out, that we're able to receive what it is they're shining out through their lens.
That's beautiful. Yes. And those little things, especially if you're a parent of a child with autism or another, maybe developmental disability where a child doesn't have the speaking capacity, maybe they're minimally speaking, non-speaking, those little things like saying they love you or saying your name or giving you a hug, those little things can mean the world to a parent. So it's wonderful that in the work that you do, you're able to help a child kind of express that and get those basic feelings and needs out in a way that parents can receive. So that's wonderful. So, Dr. Roeshan, what I know that you're here based in San Diego, California, which is awesome for us. But what if we have parents who are not locally located? How could they find a practitioner of osteopathy in their area?
So I would say really look and see if there's any osteopaths in the area. So and the tricky part is to make sure they're doing osteopathy. So sometimes there are osteopaths that are specifically working in other modalities of medicine. I find overseas, like in Europe, just north of us in Canada, osteopaths typically are doing osteopathic work, whereas someplace like the US, sometimes it is a little bit more allopathic or conventional medicine that they're working with. So it's almost like you have to check in to ask them, are they doing manual osteopathy, in what forms? So there's a lot of different forms that can take place. Some are just doing the visceral work. Some are doing like cranio-osteopathy, similar to craniosacral therapy, which is a branch of osteopathy. So some parents might be familiar with that style of work. So like the sessions that I incorporate take the neural work, the brain work, the osteopathic cranial work, and cranial sacral therapy. So I've kind of been versed in all of those, and the visceral work in environmental medicine and those types. I would say look for those. So maybe look for the words like visceral or visceral manipulation, neural manipulation, things of that sort, where people are helping to tap into those systems in the body that are small and mighty, but powerful communicators, and the advocates for the brain and the advocates for the nervous system that are showing us that they need a little help, or just literally a little love, a little adjustment to be heard and to be addressed. That can make big shifts on a cellular level, on a nervous system level.
That's so great. And so for families who are located locally in San Diego, how can they reach out to you, maybe ask more questions or connect with you, or maybe even have a consultation?
So you can reach out to me directly at Roeshan at BeWellIntegrativeMedicine.com. I'm in North County, San Diego. And soon I will be coming on board as well with a pediatric center, which is mypiph.com. And so we will have also the access of being a little more integrative under one roof, which is wonderful. So we'll have a team. So if you're looking for and you need a full village, we've got what you need there as well, which is beautiful. I'll be kind of the osteopathy branch there, and the hands-on branch to help with that. And then if you are just looking for a little bit of like an a la carte, things like that, or just have some questions and want to reach out, you can reach out to me directly, and we're at BeWellIntegrative.com.
That's so great. Thank you so much. This is just another wonderful piece that, as parents, we can consider in developing that team, like you said, for our child, that village, and helping to support our children with unique needs. So thank you again, Dr. Roeshan, for all your wonderful information.
Thanks for having me and opening up this great conversation.
Oh, I'm so excited. I hope that this has been a great episode for families, and I hope that they will, take advantage of this information. So again, families, we've been here at another episode of Thriving Special Families, where our topic has been better health for our kids, learning about osteopathy for kids. I hope that you will join us for our next episode. And always remember, families, you're going to be okay, and your child is going to be okay too. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.